Welcome to The Presser by Extra Time, where we interview key figures in the sports industry and hear their remarkable stories. Enjoy the latest episode. Well, we're back with another presser, and again, we're talking statistics. So welcome in. We've got one of the best in the stats business. Hello, and a big warm welcome to Darren O'Shaughnessy. Have I got that correct?
Yes, thank you. It's
Senior Analyst at St Kilda Footy Club in the Sports Analytics and Informatics Department. How are you going, Darren?
Going really well, thanks. Yeah, good to be in here, and we've got a bit of a break from footy at the moment, so good to keep in touch with what's going on. Yeah,
beautiful. A lot of sport going on as well, and the Saints having pretty good seasons in both the men's and women's comp this year. But yourself, Darren, talk us through your outstanding career and where you got your start and how you got to where you are now.
I guess I've had a long career in sports analytics. It wasn't really called that when I got into it in 1999. I got sort of chatting to Ted Hopkins that year. He wrote an article about some tennis rankings that I was doing just as a hobby, and I was making money on tennis betting. I'm not a great gambler, but I was at least showing that it was successful. So we got chatting, and he was expanding Champion Data at the time. So it went from a two-person operation, basically Ted Hopkins and his wife Angelica, to something where they grew into other sports. They now have 100 casual employees or more around the country, and they're working in the US as well. So I was sort of the first employee taken on in '99 as someone who could build a computer system and had some sort of footy knowledge to build out what we wanted to do. So was there for 10 years, and since then I've been working at various clubs, freelancing in a whole lot of other sports as well, and basically just being able to do what I love, which is work in sport and work with numbers, which is what I always did. Yeah.
So you obviously mentioned you love numbers, so was there anything else that attracted you to this field?
It really is that. Like sometimes, and this is your typical sort of nerd upbringing. I actually got a physics degree. That's where I went, and I thought I'd have a career doing computer science or in universities just doing physics research. But I always had this interest in sport, which is actually not that common in a physics department. The nerds those days, and probably these days, don't overlap with the jocks too much. So I was never all that good at playing any sport. Loved playing tennis, but again, not particularly good. So it was just an opportunity to use the techniques that I was seeing in all these different areas and just grab whatever data I could from sports, from cricket, from tennis or footy, and see if I could make good predictions out of it, see what the important stats seem to be, trying to see whether St Kilda was actually good or not, which they certainly weren't in the 80s. It was really just to indulge that connection between the numbers that we had, the results, the stats, and finding out a bit more about sport.
And as we can see, you're at St Kilda now, and as I mentioned, and as a big Saints fan, it's ended up that jump from physics to footy statistics has really paid off for you. And often we see on the presser our guests at one point in their career jump maybe from somewhere that isn't sport into sport, and it always usually seems to pay off. But for someone who might be at the start of their career worrying about whether to make that jump or not, what advice do you have in doing it and having that courage, I guess?
Yeah, and that's a really difficult question, and it's been a really difficult one the last few years with COVID and with professional sport essentially shutting down and a lot of good people losing their jobs with it. But in Australia and in a lot of places, there's really good wider pathways now than there were. They have a pretty good idea of what clubs need, what national sporting organisations need, what even local sporting organisations need. And there's so many areas, not just analytics, which is still quite a small body of people in this country at least. But in sports business, media, administration, there's all sorts of opportunities, and a lot of universities, a lot of institutions like Holmes Glenner putting people through with those sort of skills. So there's, in terms of making the leap, so The specialised analytics area, that's a really difficult one to leap straight into at a club level. Firstly, because you don't get to try your hand in too many ways. In AFL at least, you don't get a lot of access to good quality data outside of clubs. But building up what you can do with what data is out there is still the way to do it, just to get familiar with what you can do with data, and also to start dialogues with coaches or whatever area you're interested in and seeing what insights they want. So every coach I talk to in whatever sport, they've got insights that are unique. They're experts in the game. I might talk to a netball coach and they're describing how they try and create space for their players, and there's a terminology there, and I'll grab that word and go, right, we can use that in footy. It's really about how do you get to analyse your favourite sport or sports and build up data, even if you collect it yourself, that expresses that insight. So that's the way that I'd be saying for people to get into sports analytics at the moment, but the opportunities are increasing rapidly now, and hopefully the availability of data increases as well, and a sport like soccer, which has a fair few similarities in the way that it's continuous and you need to create space, that there's a lot more data to sink your teeth into there and start building up how you do it. Yep.
Incredible. And I mentioned it's paid off that you've got to the Saints now, but there's also been a few pretty cool stops across your career. You mentioned your freelance things, and one interested me when I was looking over your resume was that you've worked on a number of TV broadcasts and some had some pretty big sporting events in World Cups and Commonwealth Games. So talk us through that.
Yeah, and the opportunities you get in this field for sort of once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. So I got to work at the 2007 World Cup in the West Indies, got to visit little countries like St Vincent and the Grenadines, Antigua, St Lucia. You see incredible parts of the world. I've had 4 trips to Sri Lanka, and I love Sri Lanka. I guess the skills that you build up and working in broadcast are translatable everywhere. I've worked on TV productions in Europe and America, and even though the jargon's different, the way that you're trying to integrate the data with the director's vision to create a story that interests the viewer is sort of universal. And one of the best experiences I had was actually when Channel 9 and Channel 10 got the rights to the AFL back in 2002, I think it might have been, 2003 maybe, maybe a little later than that, to see how they were competing with each other and just wanting to create better stories for the audience. And I guess what drives me is to be able to innovate for either give new insights to the coaches, make the club better, or to bring people in to understand the game in a different way.
So you obviously have spoken about your roles, and you had a very vital role between 2013 and 2015, especially for Boxy, who is a Hawthorn fan. So what was it like actually playing a part in their success?
Yeah, it was a really incredible place to be. So I got brought in by the then head of football, Mark Evans, and David Rath, who is well known as a leader in sort of innovation in sport and in the AFL. In 2012, just to build some visualizations that they wanted to have a look at. They'd been on a tour of NFL clubs and saw what they were doing with data, said, well, we need a better insight into whether we're dominating the game and just not getting the reward, that sort of thing. So I built them these, what they call the drive chain, the ball going up and down the field, what sort of turnovers there are, what opportunities they're getting, so are they generating shots at goal and quality shots, and just putting that all on a map of here's how that quarter played out, and maybe we had the momentum, as they wanted to call it, but we had, we didn't have the luck of converting our shots or whatever else went wrong, and then you can break it down from there. But that's the overall view. So Then sort of stayed on with Hawthorn, just again as a consultant, a couple of days a week through till 2018. The culture of Hawthorn is incredibly good. They sort of live that family club motto. They're genuinely concerned for each other. You can have conversations with anyone. And the other thing that I noticed different from me as a St Kilda supporter is they just expected that success. So if you had a bad game, you might lose by 10 goals. Didn't happen that often, but it did happen. The expectation walking into the club on Monday was, that was a blip. We return to the winning circle next week. The tradition at St Kilda had been, oh my God, we're losing again. It's all spiralling into the I can see you know that feeling there. So it was a new experience for me as a St Kilda supporter to feel that. And it was really, they were fostering that innovation. They wanted to stay ahead of the game however they could.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. That you've sort of answered it with the culture, but the bloke to my left has been through a fair bit of pain as a Saints fan, and it's pretty funny seeing him each week. We do the show and we see each other in class when he's just not too happy. He was pretty happy at the start of this year, but not too happy. Just in jest here, what are the stats saying that Mark will be alive for the next Premiership? He's 33 at the moment.
Have to say absolutely yes. If they say keep putting teams in, once there's 30 teams, they're in trouble. No, the thing that's equalising the competition is really the salary cap on the players and the soft cap on departments. And we hate the soft cap because, as I said, lots of good people have lost their jobs. We're very constrained. If I talk to someone trying to enter the industry who's really talented in data science, they could walk out of university into a $100,000 job straight away at a consultancy, not in sport, or they could almost cut their pay in half and come work at a club. It's very hard to recommend that choice. Sorry, I diverted myself a bit then. What were we talking about?
I think you were talking about the evenness of the competition.
The evenness of the competition.
And Saints maybe winning a flag.
Yeah, so then what is your club doing that's different? So if it's Gold Coast, maybe they're bringing players through the academy, which is working for them now. We obviously got a couple of good players through our academy a couple of years ago, Mitch Owens and Marcus Windhager. There's also, though, can you just attack the game in a better way? So there's so many ways to improve what you're doing, and there's sports science, there's your strength and conditioning, rehab, everything that goes into making a club great, and the culture as well. But the coaches, just the environment, the board support, everything else that says, well, here's where we're geared for success. And I see that coming together at St Kilda. We kind of had that shock when Brett Ratton was ousted last year. Ross Lyon comes in, there's a new crew coming in. But we're kind of ahead of the game where we've, that first season no one expected us to make finals, and least of all me, to be honest. We had a coaching group with a collective 12 months with that playing group. That was Corey Enright, who'd been there for 1 year. So there's a lot of growth still to come with that group, and we're still a younger than average team on the field, at least less experienced than average.
So going back to what you've actually done and what you do, what's the best part of it?
What's the best part of it? There's so many really good things, and the people that you get to meet and work with, and to see the impact that you can have as well, because clubs are so lean, everything that you're working on is being used. There's you might do just as a research project, let's have a look into this aspect of the game and see what we could be doing better. And let's say you might make findings about when we're rebounding the ball after a repeat entry. So just something as peculiar as that. We tend to be kicking it here and we're getting intercepted. We're getting intercept marks in the oppo's front half. That's obviously bad because they just go straight back inside. What are successful teams doing in that phase of play? How would we structure up to do that? And just having those conversations and then making a change. So that's happened that happens regularly with all analysts, not just data analysts, because analysts that concentrate more on video and know the sport better than I do can look at the vision and say, here's where our structure's wrong. But sometimes you might surface that sort of insight from the data first. You might say, did you know when we cut it down to this, our slow play here or our long down the line kicks, we're not getting the right results out of it. Let's have a look at the vision to see what's going on. And that was something Hawthorn would do as well, that especially coming into finals, they'd really drill down into aspects of the opposition coming up, where are their strengths, why have they got that strength, and how do we counter it. So, you feel like analysis skills are sort of the foundation of coaching. And I'm sure they're not, but that's what they feel like for us.
Yeah. Just on the back of that, how closely do you work with the coaching panel and the high performance department at the Saints, and what does a sort of a weekday look like, a general day look like for you?
There's this weekly cycle, obviously, so we measure everything on days before the next match. The first day or two is concerned with review of that game, putting together reports, seeing what went wrong, seeing what went right. So again, I'm just speaking mainly from the analysis side, and I work more with the coaches than with the other sides of it. But then this time of year, I'm mainly working with the list manager and the recruiters. And then we've got a sports scientist as well. We've actually got a new one that we've just hired. I haven't met him yet because the department's been closed down, but he looks very promising. It's about getting, from my point of view, because I've got an IT background as well, it's making sure we've got the support across the organisation, that the athlete management system, the information systems are there when they need them, and giving them the right messages. Yep.
And you mentioned earlier how each club try different things and may use their analytics department differently. On that note, you mentioned St Kilda's really on the up. Obviously, first year with Ross, quite successful this year. AFLW I mentioned as well, doing quite well. Had a longest win streak in history. There you go. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah. Finally got there. Is there anything obviously post AFLW season that you're looking to innovate with or implement new during the pre-season this season, or that you can tell us? You don't have to tell us everything. Give us your secrets.
I wish I could sort of tell you. There are some changes in how we structure the department. That's probably a bit boring. But we'll discuss that and sort of nail it down when we get back, and then the players arrive again at the end of November. So it's straight into teaching them the new game plan and getting them up to speed on what's going on. And AFLW we try and, from my point of view, we try and have those connections amongst the analysts, amongst the coaches as well, where we're not. Where the information, the ways of looking at the data that we have in the men's program are available to the women as well.
So how far can statistics and IT systems actually take the AFL?
Oh, that's a leading question. It's good. A lot further than they are at the moment in a lot of areas. So the AFL, like everyone else, lost a lot of good people through COVID and just natural attrition over the years. So we could be doing a lot better looking at other sports with our use of data, with our collection of data, with having strategic leadership in that area from the AFL. It's getting a bit political maybe, but we really need player tracking. It doesn't have to be like knowing where every player is at every time on the ground, but at the moment we have to assign a resource to just count the number of people that are inside 50 for each team when we kick the ball inside. That's something that you should have player tracking for, just to say, well, there were 5 of ours and 7 of theirs, and these were the ones closest to the ball if you need that. So, you look at any other sport now, and even at community level in soccer here, my daughter plays at Bentley Greens she's only 13. They have full player tracking. They have cameras set up beside the ground. They get a report 24 hours later about every significant action in the ground in the game. We can watch the video of what she did. And that's not a top-level team. They're a well-resourced team, but we don't have anything like that at a professional AFL club. So that's really, without that data, you can't get proper analysis of space, of how Collingwood wins. And I know Collingwood do a fair bit in this area, that they continually get that outnumber at contest, and that's why they're winning so many games.
You've obviously got a background in IT and artificial intelligence. Do you think that's something the AFL can bridge that gap using, or are they a bit scared it'll take over the world?
Everyone should be scared of that. No, I get probably a meeting every month or two now with a new company saying, well, we can do our AI in sport, and they vary in quality and experience, but that's certainly where it's going. That it's bringing that vision analysis and strategic insights into generating it from AI. And from my point of view, I'm quite excited about it. I know that there is a fair bit of apprehension, but what I see is we have a limited budget. We have 4 analysts employed by the club. If we had AI that could take care of that lower level of analysis, just counting players, identifying phases of play, summarising opposition styles, then we can go on top of that and say, right, what's the specific way in which that club is doing it, and how does another club counter it, and how would we counter it? So, clubs that can build on an AI system, I think, will get an advantage. Now, the issue is, are these systems ready, or are they a whole lot of junk data just fed into a machine learning system at the moment? It's a mix, so you have to be able to pick the right ones.
And so you mentioned Bentleigh Greens being a well-resourced team. What do you think is the difference between an elite team or an elite club and a well-resourced club?
Wealthy supporters, ask Carlton. No, that's more what I'm talking about, though. That if you've got that natural advantage of, you've got the territory, you've got the support base, you've got the ability to fund some extra resources of some sort, that's an advantage now, and that's why I think the AFL's soft cap is a good thing, even though we strain against it the whole time. So you want to have an equal playing field, and at the same time have enough in there for some innovation, some difference.
Now, this might be a pretty easy question for you to answer, but is sport overanalyzed? Is there too many stats in sport?
We'd all be, if you love footy, you want to analyse it, even if it's just talking about your favourite players and what you saw on the weekend. It's and you'd be surprised how much discussion with the people at the club, not just coaches, but everyone working in the general staff. It's just telling you stories about the game and how much you enjoyed a certain moment, a great mark or anything else. So not all of it is hard numbers. It's seeing a player do a special thing and then saying, well, can you do more of that? Yeah.
So talking all about stats. So what's been the most recent stat that's been tracked, or the ability to track a certain play? What's it been?
Yeah, okay. Don't want to give away too many secrets.
Obviously not giving away the trade secrets. But
for us, and I guess this is broad enough to share, that the separation of types of games. So with the stand the mark rule that's come in a couple of years ago, the game sped up again. Scoring's increased a little bit. There's the opportunities for very slow, static play and slowly building up are actually minimal now. It's surprising, but having that knowledge of, so you get your stats, you might have, we had 50 inside 50s, but we want to know what was the context of those. So did it come out of slow play? Did it come out of an immediate re-entry, out of a stoppage? Was it that we'd actually got a fast break and we were potentially getting a free player inside 50 that we could go to with a really easy kick? So I think that's the focus. It's getting the context and the style of the play into every analysis you do, and then to say, well, we didn't get enough of that sort of play. Why not? They were playing a loose man in defence or whatever it is. And then to say how successful are clubs when they get into certain types of play, fast play, slow play, stoppage, whatever it is. It's more and more dividing that and then building it back up into a total picture.
Do you think, another simple question, but do you think that along with sport, statistics are, I guess, the international language? You said before you obviously worked in a lot of different nations, and the lingo might change, but everyone understands.
Especially across invasion sports, so like your rugby codes, soccer, even NFL, although it's a bit more one-dimensional sometimes. There's common knowledge about that, and I find reading research papers in soccer or books about soccer strategy really adds a fair bit to what I'm doing. And then the stats, well, we've kind of got a unique game where we've got no offside, we've got intermingled players, you can kick a ball, you can handball. There's no direct correlation with the other sports, so we do have to reinvent the wheel a lot. And 18 players per side on the field, that's insane. 160 metres long. Are you kidding me? You take that to soccer technology people or soccer coaches and they just throw up their hands. It's hard enough dealing with 10 on 10 in the outfield.
How passionate and how much work do the players put into understanding the statistics around their game? Yeah,
that's an interesting one. Not much. It depends on the player. So I'll occasionally get some really good questions from players. I don't actually, myself, don't deal with the players directly too much. It's mainly with the coaches, but the other analysts definitely are direct. They're talking about really fine-tuned aspects of the game because, that's the coach's role from my point of view, is to translate what I'm doing into something that changes the player's behaviour. If I started doing that, we've tried this at times where I might address the players and say, well, here's what we're doing, and I get a lot of glazed eyes. And I think if I was in their position, I'd be doing the same. I don't want to know about all these numbers and shot equity. I'd just tell me what's going to win us the game. So I think there are examples of players that have got to know the analytics in various sports and have improved their game as a result. It needs to be not misleading though. So your first encounter with stats as a player is normally you're a junior and someone starts counting the number of touches you get in a game, and it's like, you run to the statistician at the end of the game. I had 22 touches, 6 clearances. How about that? And it's good that there's software that can do that, but we never want that to be a target of a player, just to say, we need you to get 30 touches today. That's just that's the wrong message for them. Every day of the week, that's the wrong message for them. We want them to play their role in the team. And the trouble is, most people can understand a count of numbers and, that 30 touches looks like a good game. But it's harder to have that message of cooperation and the value of your touches without getting the coach to put his eye over it first.
Now, obviously, a lot of our fans listen and watch AFL, and I think they will actually know what Champion Data is now. But let's go back to Champion Data. What was your involvement with them, and how did it get started? Obviously, you spoke about the founder and his wife, but what did you actually do for them, and what have you done since?
Ted had obviously built a pretty successful service that most clubs were using, Ted and Angelica. What they got was, so this is 1999, when there was something called the .com boom, which is probably before your time, but a whole lot of tech companies were getting huge valuations based on what they could do about having a .com email address and website. God, it seems like ancient history now. So they got venture capital to, apply this quite successful model of digging down into the sport. Like Ted invented things like the hardball get, the kick clanger, all these terminology that we've had. That was what he was delivering to coaches in the 90s. And then they sort of took it from their kitchen benchtop, which is where they assembled this stuff, and built a proper IT system that I was then involved in, and we used that for rugby league, rugby union, cricket. Although cricket is a beast, it's unlike any other sport. Very, very difficult to even score correctly. And went out to essentially make this model of how sport should be captured and analysed in these various areas. And we got experts, we got top coaches and analysts in those sports to help build this stuff. And we had some successes, but in the end, we knew footy better than the rest. And there's also a very parochial side to it. So if you try and get into rugby league and you don't have everyone on board, because there's all sorts of rival factions, then you'll be white-handed the whole time. I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's essentially what goes on. I found that myself when dealing with American sports as well, that if you don't know their language innately, if you don't know exactly what they're talking about, you'll sort of get the reaction of, oh, this guy, he's not for us. So each sport has its own barriers to entry, which you kind of have to know natively or really, really study.
How important are stats in telling the story of a sporting contest?
Oh, for me, they're everything, yeah. And the first stat that we go to is were we just unlucky with our shots at goal, or was the opposition? So for me, that's if I can't do that, I'm out of a job essentially. And it's not telling the whole story, but it is, here's a consistent set of reasons why we won or lost that game. And that's maybe drier than what the coach would want, but then someone like Ross Lyon can look at that and he's got his own view of the data as well, and turn that into, well, here's what we need to change for the second half, or here's what we need to change for next week. But yeah, to me, and Ross actually describes it as, well, it's objective. We do a lot of things that are subjective, that are, I didn't like what that player did, I'm going to tell him to change it. But over time, maybe this player is actually doing the right thing more often than not. So, building up a better profile of players through data when you can't hope to see everything every player does every game is very important to get that right.
How will data and statistics and obviously technology, how do you see it impacting the sports media industry in the future? Or at the moment?
Media has been a driver, and I think your guest last month, Matt, talked about this as well, that and that's been my experience, that the media is always looking for what's the next big thing, whether that's the stat of the week or some new visualization, something they can put a sponsor's brand on and sell as a new product, Snicko, whatever it is. And that then provides the funding sometimes to do a different analysis and build a new insight. We had plenty of examples of that at Champion Data where, there'd be a question out of the blue about some facet of the game. We'd analyse it and we'd say, there's actually something in this. Do you want to turn it into, a regular report? There's something unusual here that your readers are going to like, or your viewers are going to like.
So, all this talk about stats, what is your favourite stat?
What's my favourite stat? I've mentioned it a couple of times already, but shot equity, essentially. So that's what is also called expected score. It's the value of the shots that you've generated in scoreboard terms. So if you take a mark 30 metres out directly in front, you expect to kick that, say, nearly 90% of the time. It's worth more than 5 points in terms of the potential or the equity that you've built up in generating that shot. Sort of like how you build up equity in your mortgage if you've got a bank home loan, and then you try and convert that equity into a goal by converting it. So I invented that one. It came from backgammon, which I love playing backgammon. It's the Australian Open next month, so I'll be up on the Gold Coast playing for the national title. So I've never won one, but one day.
Best of luck.
One day. And there's a whole theoretical framework out of backgammon that I've applied to footy, which now has spread across the industry. So I guess I'm proud of that one, and it'd have to be my favourite. Yeah.
So how did it actually come to you playing it? And Have you taken your own stats? How do you win a national championship? How do you think you can break through?
These days, so it's all cameras. If you're playing over a board, it's being recorded. You can actually send it over to people to log all of the moves in the game and analyse them, find out how far away from being a good player you are. It's another sport or game that's being invaded by technology and AI. So the AI players at the top level are the best in the world, to the point where players are judged, like even at world championships, not just by whether they win or lost, because there's a lot of luck in backgammon, but how close they were to perfect play. The perfect play being what the AI has done, and they're the best are within 2 parts in 1,000 of perfect play by that definition, which is very close. So if you're like me and you're 6 parts in 1,000 away from perfect, you're a mile off on a match that long. Yeah.
So I'll be even further than that then. I'm guessing, and Boxy will be even further than that.
Speaking of cameras and obviously simulation and things like that, a big talking point this season was obviously that one goal in Adelaide, or non-goal in Adelaide. I think we asked Matt this as well last presser, but do you think, and how do you think cameras can or could have improved that? We obviously see in the NFL they've got tracking in the ball that they don't really actually use, but do you see that as maybe a suggestion?
So that's one where the technology obviously would have solved it if it was called on, but so many of them are still grey. You'll still have debates over whether Marchbank touched the ball in that Carlton game in around 2024, was it? It was in the finals. I can't remember which game it was. And we've got our peculiar rules where it's not just the ball has to cross the line. It has to not have touched the post, has to have come off a part of that team's player that's below the knee, without touching an opposition player. There's also, you'll never, without, even with perfect, camera angles surrounding the game, there'll be situations where it doesn't work. And I'd prefer us to just keep the play moving and hope for the best. I know that's sort of anti-technology, but I would even say never hold up, unless it's right near the end of the game and it's close. Just don't hold up play for a review. Just let them keep playing. If the score was wrong, then make the adjustment and do whatever change you need to make. But when I see them wasting 50 seconds because they're not sure if a mark was cleanly taken on the behind line, so is it going to be a point or is it going to be a mark? It all changes as a score. It doesn't really change the play after that. And we've got this great sport as well, where if you're kicking in after a point, now that they've got, again, that rule's changed, you get to run out to 25 metres from goal. The likelihood of each team scoring next is about the same after a behind now, which it wasn't a few years ago before this rule changed, where you could have repeat entries, you keep the pressure on after you score a behind, and you actually, when you got a point, it was worth more than a point because you got more opportunities. You don't need to hold up play for reviews. You can just, if it goes back to the centre, that's about a 50-50 chance. If it's a kick-in, that's about a 50-50 chance. Just keep going and adjust the score at the quarter break if you need to. I know that's a minority view.
No, well, having experienced it in a grand final where Tom Hawkins hit the post, I think that there should be score reviews after everything because of that.
You review it, but you don't hold up the play for it, is what I would say.
The thing that I like about it is, and that's a perfect suggestion for me, because I'm of that view that you can always change the clock.
Yeah.
But you don't want to take time off the clock. You can always take the time to review it and then just add time to the game if you need to.
I would say, though, with that, I think, would you say that Australian sport is more anti that than, American sport? You see it more often that they'll stop the play once the play stops. Yeah, they go back to it. Have you seen that more with you've travelled the world and seen it.
Yeah, we've got unrealistic expectations of perfection these days. We think because we've got something counting to a tenth of a second and high-def cameras and the ability to review, that we should get everything perfect. But that's not how we play sport growing up, and it's not. I don't think it's a realistic target, and we should accept that. we'll try and get things right, but the most important thing is that we keep playing the game and keep people engaged in the game, both the players and the watchers.
Something that intrigued me a lot and made me very happy as a watcher of my Hawks was the move of Ben Mcavoy between the two clubs you've been at. Didn't make my co-host here very happy, but just talk to us about your involvement there.
So, and obviously as a Saints fan, this really pained me as well, but Hawthorn were pretty committed to a young ruckman out of Brisbane called Billy Longer, and I was involved with their list managers, basically reviewing anyone that they needed to make a serious decision on, trying to get down to what really made them tick, what were they providing on the ground, what wasn't in the sort of stats headlines. So Longer was obviously a very good tap ruckman. What I found when I dug into his numbers was he wasn't very accountable. In fact, even for his age, and he was only about 21 at the time, the trajectory that he was on in terms of his performance being below his opponent's performance was not going to make him league standard, really, was how it looked. And that was surprising. They were pretty, and I was surprised by it. They got me to check quite a few different things, and basically they went cold on Longer a bit, and at the same time each club is meeting each other. So Hawthorn's meeting with St Kilda, and St Kilda was very open to ideas about trading at that time. I won't name who or what or whatever was doing. And they essentially looked down the list and asked if Mcavoy was available, and he wasn't not available, even though he was on holiday in Thailand or somewhere at the time. And essentially, Hawthorn grabbed Mcavoy, who at the time, I certainly thought was a future captain of St Kilda and turned out to be a future captain of Hawthorn.
Great one,
universally liked player as well, a lot of good qualities. And as the kicker for that, was that St Kilda picked up Longer, who didn't amount to much as a ruckman. Nothing against Billy Longer, but he really didn't sort of justify what he was picked up with. Actually, the next pre-season, I actually doubted myself. I thought, am I still a St Kilda supporter after seeing the decisions that they've made around that? And I've actually been a factor in that happening, working with a rival club. Am I really going to, or am I switching to Hawthorn by doing this? Because I've been there for a few years then. But as soon as the red, white and black ran out, first pre-season game, I thought, no, this is my team. So crisis of faith averted, and now I get to do something about it, hopefully.
I thank you very much for your involvement. No, Ben was incredible, and like you mentioned, captain, premierships, and just a really fun and good person to watch play football, and did it in a really good way. But it was interesting you mentioned that how your involvement through that period, is that something I guess people don't realise goes on, the analysis of a player in that list management, I guess through the trade period and stuff, to teams really analyse players, or?
And my busiest time almost of the year was the trade period a couple of weeks ago, where we've got all sorts of guys who are on the market, who might be on the market, who we might want to assess, and I've got a better framework of analysis. So this is how I'm looking at a wingman, this is how I'm looking at a small forward, this is how I'm looking at a ruckman, and I can bring that stuff in. But I had to create that at the time, and then I need to, sometimes the stats are misleading. So maybe a guy's only played 6 AFL games this year because of injury. You go back a few years, you see he was playing a different role then. How successful was he at VFL level? What sort of quality team was he in? Did he actually just get 40 touches because he was against the bottom VFL team? There's all that sort of stuff that you really need to take into account before you can say this guy is worth this much. So, essentially I look at every one we consider at the moment, and every club would be the same. They'd have data analysts doing some sort of report.
Do you talk up the players that are potentially getting shopped around from your club, or just jazz up their stats a little bit?
It's interesting. We actually got asked to do that at Champion Data a bit. It was the agents asking for that. So, just what stats have you got that put my client in the best light? And I'm sure that still happens. Yeah.
It's very interesting, and St Kilda were active in the trade period, so it was good to see Liam Henry and Paddy Dow. And
Liam Henry was a thumbs up from me.
Yeah, Paddy Dow.
Yeah, Paddy's an interesting one, so I'm not going to be able to comment too closely. He's obviously a clearance beast. He's probably got to improve other aspects of his game to, as Ross says, we're a system team, so you need to know where you are and what your role is, no matter where the ball is. So even though he's going to help us at clearance, can he, play his midfield role outside of there? So I'm excited to see what he can do with a new coaching environment and everything else.
And you mentioned that system was Liam Henry very much a system pick with how he can work the other wing with Brad Hill? I think he spoke about that himself.
Yeah, although Hill probably played less than 50% on the wing. He was playing, he did play wing, but we had Ryan Burns, Mason Wood also playing wing. That's the quality you want. You need your wings to be able to run all day, to be able to put in high intensity efforts, to impact in defence and in attack. It's a really demanding job. He obviously had a bit of a breakout year, Liam Henry, and really hopeful that he can show that.
So you mentioned when you were going through it, the impact that they might have at a VFL level. Mm-hmm. What's the difference there?
We really don't get detailed stats at VFL level. So if I look at a midfielder and he's got 35 touches, that's about the level I'm going to get. So in the AFL, I can break it down to exactly where he got every touch, what pressure he was putting on opposition players when they had the ball, and even look at things like, does he tail off towards the end of a game? Maybe he's not fit. I can't do any of that really in the VFL. So you're looking at a broad thing, against his peers, against players who are in similar roles, against that quality of team. Is he doing okay?
And before we let you go, have you got a way too early prediction for the Saints in 2024?
Well, it's the only way is up, right?
Just give you that now.
It's a hard competition to win. I guess having made finals, that's the minimum standard. So, you can't count anything in or out. I probably can't answer that one.
How much work will go into, I guess, it's talked about a lot, the benchmark team. So how much work do you reckon will go into analysing Collingwood?
Quite a bit. And that is often a focus of the post-season when teams come back. They will put some work into, right, let's have a look at the top four, but especially the Premiership team. What did they do right? Now, this was a pretty even season, all the way down to 11th probably was really even. Even the top four didn't have that much of a gap on the numbers that we were looking at. But there is that tendency to just say, right, that team's broken the mould in this way. And it was already filtering through what we were doing through the year to identify how Collingwood just kept winning the contest in dangerous areas. Their ball movement was obviously really clean and fast. So what can we copy from that, and what can we counter in teams that are doing that? That'll be the major question.
Well, we've really appreciated having you in today, Darren, and hopefully this time next year we can have you back on again. We'll be talking about the Saints like we talk about the Magpies. So for your and Woodsy's sake, but absolutely love what you do, and thanks heaps for sharing a story on the presser this week.
My
it's
pleasure.
been awesome.
Yep.
That's it for another episode of the presser.